you very much, and thank you for that wonderful welcome that you've given us coming here today in Crawley. Can I say congratulations to all of you on the general election campaign that was fought here. Because that general election will go down in history. Because all the commentariat, all the broadsheets wrote us off at the beginning. You remember that? They all said it's impossible. Two things happened. One, we produced a manifesto which was fully costed and was transformational, and is transformational, about the kind of country and kind of society we can, and I hope will, get to live in. And secondly, we were relentlessly positive and optimistic in the campaign. I did 100 events during the 6 weeks of the election campaign in all parts of Britain. Large numbers of people came out to events, people that had never been to a political rally of any sort in their lives, came because they were interested in what we had to say and interested in the policies we were putting forward. And the other factor was, I do not indulge at any time ever in personal abuse. I'm not getting into the gutter with anybody, because my sights are on something a bit better and a bit higher than that. And that is the way that we conduct ourselves, on the basis of the policies that will improve the lives of everybody in this country, not the amount of muckraking and personal abuse that we can throw at other people. Since the election, party membership has continued to rise and is now at 575,000 and continuing to grow. And when we come through Crawley on our way to Brighton for the conference, I'm sure all the hotels in Crawley are going to be taken as well, because there's so many people coming to the Brighton conference this year. It's going to be a magnificent affair. But it's what happens on the ground all over the country that matters. And over the past few weeks, there's been a number of council by-elections straight after the general election. And I'll give you 3 examples of what's happened. There's a little town in Cumbria called Alston, right up in the north, in Eden Valley. And it's a small place, and that council has never had a Labour councillor of any sort. 3 weeks ago, there was a by-election, and Labour won a seat on that council with 55% of the vote, in an area we've never had a Labour we gained, for the first time in 40 years, a seat in Worthing. I'm sure plenty of you were there in Worthing campaigning for that. So congratulations to everyone who took part in that campaign. You know that feeling when you're out there door knocking together, out there campaigning together, you get that sense of camaraderie building up, and it's infectious on the doorstep, and people come towards us because they can see that enthusiasm. And on the same day, the people of Margate quite rightly turned their backs on the, well, I want to be polite here, on UKIP, and voted Labour, and elected a Labour councillor. And in Crawley, you've done great campaigning. You gained a seat, you won the council, and you're going to win the council again. And I congratulate Peter on his leadership and the council on what it's trying to do, despite the ravages of Tory cuts against you. Well done. Our manifesto was put together in quite a short time, and I want to say thank you to all those that contributed to it, because to write something so transformational as that in a very short time is quite a difficult thing to do, but it was done. The fundamentals of it were that we were challenging and resisting the policies of austerity, which are essentially that the majority of the population, those people out of work and in work, those people on average or below average incomes, have got to pay the price for a banking crisis that they did not cause, did not benefit from, but other people did benefit from. We're saying it's time to turn the clock round, do it around. And we quite clearly said how we would pay for what we want to do and intend to do. And after the election, Parliament was recalled, of course. The Conservatives didn't have the majority they thought they were going to have. In fact, they lost a lot of seats. And so they managed to find £1 billion to buy off the DUP. Now, it's very odd that they can find £1 billion to buy off the DUP, which makes them each worth £100 million. Now, I'm a very keen football supporter, but I think transfer fees are excessive. And £100 million for each DUP MP seems a bit on the high side to me. Arsene Wenger would certainly not approve of that degree of expenditure. And at the same time, the same week, after the government announced its programmes, we forced votes on the Queen's speech. And the first one was on the public sector pay cap. Just get this right. So a government can find £1 billion to buy off the DUP, but they retain the public sector pay cap, which means, in reality, every NHS worker has had a 14% pay cut over the past 7 years. It's time to lift the cap and ensure that NHS and all public sector workers can negotiate freely and properly to be paid properly for the valuable work they do. It's no good congratulating firefighters, paramedics, police officers for running into a burning building, as they did at Grenfell Tower, and then deny them the proper reward of decent wages and job security in the future. Enough of this canton hypocrisy. Pay them properly and fund the services properly. I was interested in what Morgan was saying about the National Health Service, because the National Health Service is something that we all rely on. It's something we are very proud of as a party. The principles surrounding the NHS are central to everything we believe in. The right of every human being to get healthcare free at the point of need in this country. I think it's an amazing achievement, and the more you read about it, the more you think about it, how amazing that achievement was in the aftermath of the Second World War and all the problems that were faced then. It would have been so easy for that 1945 government to say, yes, it's an aspiration, we'll put it off because it's too difficult. They said, no, we'll do it because it's difficult and because it's what we believe in. But it's under threat. It's under threat from privatisation, it's under threat from the contracting out of services, it's under threat from the internal market, and it's under threat from underfunding of it. And the sustainability and transformation plans all sound very wonderful until you look at them in detail, and all over the country you see services being planned to be reduced or cut, or greater distances travelled to go to A&E or maternity departments that are essential. You also see significant and serious underfunding of mental health services, which then of course impacts on the ability of a hospital to deliver services. And you also see a problem of the lack of social care, both for needy elderly adults as well as those with special needs or those with disabilities that need help and support. When you underfund social care, in reality, you pass the bill on to somebody else. And it's usually a family member, usually a woman, who loses her job, gives up her career in order to care for people because there isn't a care service available for them. Dementia could happen to any of us, just as much as cancer could happen to any of us. There should be a parity of care for both of those. If you suffer from cancer, obviously the NHS is there to treat you, and I pay huge tribute to the treatment that's given. But there isn't the same support there for those suffering from dementia or other conditions like that. That's why I'm very serious about development of a national care service. So we're using this opportunity, possibly a very short opportunity, to develop greater detail of our policy. We put forward the ideas in the general election of the National Care Service, of the National Education Service, and of the housing programme we want to develop. I've asked all of the shadow teams to now come up with much more detailed proposals about how we'll carry this out, and consult widely in the party, amongst affiliated unions, and amongst thousands of interest groups that have a huge role to play in how we develop our policy. So when we develop those policies, there is an incorporation, there's an inclusiveness. People who've contributed to the development of Labour policy on special needs education, on social care, on the NHS structures, on the role that local government must play within it, they feel stronger about it. They're going to feel much happier knocking on doors in the general election or whenever it comes, saying, well, actually, I contributed to that policy. This is part of me that I'm campaigning for. That is democracy in action in the largest political party that the Labour Party has ever been. And I'm very proud of the way that we're working to achieve that. And I want you all to feel part of that process, because we need to be strong to get ready for the election. Now, we're campaigning all over the country over the summer. There are now 75 marginal constituencies that we believe we can win. We failed to gain a small number, a significant small number, of marginal seats in the general election, and so we weren't able to form a majority or even a minority Labour government. But I'm very determined that we shall build on the success of the 2017 general election. We put on 3 million votes during the 6-week election campaign, a bigger increase than has ever been achieved in any election by any party since 1945. And that was because of the work of all of you in this room, and all of those party members and supporters all over the country who dropped everything for the 6 weeks of the campaign to go out there with a message of hope, with a message of opportunity, with a message of transformation of the kind of world and kind of society that we can live in. We might have to do it all again. I only did 100 events during the 6 weeks of the campaign. Next time we're going to do it properly. We're going to do even more than that. We'll cover the whole country. I'm going to the southwest, I'm going to the Midlands, I'm going to Scotland, all through August and September, so that we get that Labour message across, and colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet are doing the same all over the summer, so that we're ready for it. But what essentially is it that we're offering? We're saying that we need a government that's on the side of people, a government that is prepared to invest in health, in education, in housing, the vital ingredients of life, a government that is prepared to take up the cudgels of the Brexit negotiation, to protect jobs and ensure we have tariff-free trade access to Europe to protect those jobs in the future, and a government that looks at the world in a different way, that sees in every child a creativity that is often blocked by lack of opportunity in the future. So I'm proud of our pledge to increase school funding. I'm also very proud of our pledge to have a pupil arts premium, so that every child can learn a musical instrument and develop their creative side as well. And a government that would not be afraid to invest in infrastructure and industry for the future. So that, for example here, the railway system is busy, it's overcrowded, and Southern Rail, I hear, don't deliver a very good service. I heard it's terrible. Is this true? Yes. Thank you, I thought it was. I think it's time Southern Rail changed hands. Yeah. I think it's time the public... blaming the rail workers and start blaming the company that runs it instead, okay? Yeah. But it's also about developing policies that go beyond rail as well, because clearly there's an infrastructure need for much greater capacity between London and Brighton, that's obvious. But there's also a need to invest in a coherent public transport system for the whole country, and that means buses as well. 1.5 billion journeys are made per year by train. More than 3 times that are made by bus at various points all over the country. But there are whole rural areas that get no buses whatsoever. There are many towns or cities where buses basically cease to exist after 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. It's only in London where you have a fully regulated bus service, you get a bus service that runs round the clock and is a pretty good service. I don't see why London should have it all. I think it should be the same all over the country. And so we've appointed Cat Smith to develop the bus policy along with Andy McDonald, the Shadow Secretary of State. And we want your views on that because good transport infrastructure, good broadband connectivity are important in the development of rural economy as well as urban economies. Those are issues that we have to deal with. And so I'm keen that we develop all those policies. I'd also say this, that our environmental offer is quite simply this, that we cannot walk away from the Paris Climate Change Accord, which President Trump wants to do. We as a Labour government will be straight on the phone to him saying, don't walk away from the one agreement that's been reached by all the countries in the world to help to try and preserve and protect our planet for all of us for the future. Don't walk away from it on the basis of the short-term greed of a number of your wealthy backers and friends. We need to protect the climate. And our offer is also about social justice within our society. I was very clear that the idea that education should be gradually curtailed at both ends by diktat of government policy. That is, you privatise preschool and you start charging more and more for post-school education, means that, in effect, those children who have wealthy enough parents get good preschool and get to go to university, get to go to college, and so on in life. We can't have a postcode lottery which denies the opportunity for children from poorer backgrounds to either get the preschool they need or to go to college or university in the future. So I was very clear that it would be expensive, but I was determined that we would say we will end student fees, we will end college fees, and we'll bring back adult education free for all in our society. Because the individual obviously benefit, but we also all benefit from it when we have skilled people and skilled workers. Just because somebody has had a tough upbringing doesn't mean they can't become a great engineer, a great doctor, or whatever it happens to be they want to do. It's a waste of the opportunities for all of us. So that's generally what the Labour offer is about. It's about people, but it's also about fairness in society. That's why I've said we bring rail back into public ownership, why I believe the water companies should be brought under public control because of the high prices they're charging and the asset stripping they've been indulged in since they got hold of those water companies. And the postal service is a crucial public service that ought to be publicly owned and publicly run. It's very much as we campaign together over the next few weeks and months, we put the government under pressure in Parliament. We put them under pressure at every opportunity, over public sector pay, over investment in health, in local government, over their walking by on the other side when industries get into problems. The Labour government would not have walked by on the other side while the steel industry was going through a crisis. We would intervene and support the industry and help because we want to create a strong national manufacturing infrastructure of sustainable jobs in this country in a sustainable environment. We're strong because people have joined us. We're strong because we've offered something very different in society. And that strength is going to be there for the future, there for any general election whenever it comes, and it's going to be there to sustain that government in office when it takes on what will be very powerful vested interests that won't like what we're saying, won't like what we're doing, but the people as a whole will recognise we cannot go on as we are. Is it right that a nurse working flat out in an NHS hospital has so little pay that they have to access a food bank? Is it right that there are thousands of people sleeping on the streets of our towns and cities every night while there are empty properties around the place? Isn't there a message from Grenfell Tower? A towering inferno of poverty in a sea of prosperity is unacceptable in any country or any society. Let's resolve and redouble our efforts. To deal with injustice invest for the future. That's what brings people together. We're together here because we believe in broadly the same things. We believe broadly in the kind of society that we want to bring together. That's what the general election campaign showed. 13 million people came to support that vision for the future. We need a few more to put it into practice. Are you with me?
Could I take this opportunity to thank Jeremy very much for that speech and for his kind words about the local Labour Council. As he mentioned, my name is Peter Lamb. I'm the current Labour leader of Crawley Borough Council, and we're out right now knocking doors, and I hope to see as many of you as possible out there. We started our next general election campaign on the 9th of June this year. We're going to be out there knocking doors every week from now until whenever that contest is called. Because we won this seat back in 2005 by 37 votes. But we're not going to win it by 37 votes next time round. We want a majority, a huge majority, of the side that says to the Tories to get out of our town. We are no longer allowed the politics of division, to allow the politics of the few and not the many to dictate our futures. And we need your help to get us there. Thank you very much. Of course, for me to play Dimbleby at this session. We've had people taking in questions as people have been coming in, and we've had party officers sorting through to try and get a gender balance and a mixture of questions. And the first one I've got up, we've got a Doug here. Is Doug in the audience? Yeah. Doug, can we get a microphone over to Doug over there?
Yes, I was talking about the nationalisation of the railways. I was concerned about the fact that we hadn't won the election, because Southern is on the way out now, for the franchise. And in that time of going to re-elect us, they are going to put a contract back on for them that will make it more harder for us to gain control of that franchise. That's what I'm concerned about, really.
Okay, we're going to take them in three. I've got a Margaret here, Margaret Mathers or Matthews.
Hi, yes, Jeremy has already mentioned the NHS and my is it working? Yeah.
Try it.
Is it working? Oh yes, it's definitely working. Yes, Jeremy's already mentioned the NHS, and my question was really what his plans were, how he's going to stop the privatisation that's already going on at the moment with the Tory government.
And last one in this round, we've got Harry Minogue. Where's Harry?
Hi. I've been reading recently about how automation is going to change the way that the working world is structured, and with so many people threatened with a lack of employment, for example, the transport industry, many cars are going to be automated, and they believe at some point we'll have a Great Depression level of unemployment. Labour's the name of the party. What are we going to do when human labour may not apply?
Thanks very much for your questions. The first one from Doug on Southern Rail. Yeah, Southern Rail has the most peculiar franchise there ever was, but it seems they're just paid actually. That's about it, whether they run a service or not. They seem to get their cheque coming through from the Department of Transport. And it's clearly a completely unacceptable situation. It's a very different franchise to any of the others. And as I've said, that we would take them into public ownership at the end of each franchise, and we'll put them on warning and on notice on that. But it's also about the requirements we place on them, the kind of service they operate. and the improvements that are necessary on stations as well. For example, why doesn't Crawley Town Station have disability access? It's shocking, absolutely shocking, and it should have. So we will put requirements to ensure good service. We will also be investing in the reopening of some of the disused lines. We'll also be investing in improving the capacity. The principle being that we want the passenger services to be publicly owned. That is the aim of the government. There will be difficulties placed in our way to do it, of that I'm very sure. But I'm quite prepared to face those difficulties. As far as I'm concerned, public ownership of railways is a very, very high priority for me. It's something I'm determined to achieve when we have a Labour government. The second question from Margaret on the National Health Service. I had a good discussion today with a number of people working in the NHS, as well as visiting a GP practice this morning. And the NHS runs essentially on the goodwill of its staff. Many NHS workers work way beyond the hours that they're paid for. Many nurses don't clock off because they want to make sure a patient is settled or discharged or whatever has to be done. They just stay at their post and do the job. And it cannot go on like this, where you understaff hospitals, understaff wards, and expect people to cope. There was somebody telling me this morning that they've had an understaffed ward frequently, almost every night for several weeks now. That's dangerous, dangerous for the patients and dangerous for the staff. And the mental health crisis is very severe and very serious, where people with a mental health crisis show up at A&E departments because there's nowhere else to go. And then obviously we do the best to help them, but there has to be proper funding. And what we said was that we would fund plug the funding gap straight away, set up the National Care Service and suspend the sustainability and transformation plans to look again at the provision of local services and lift the pay cap. This is expensive, I fully acknowledge that, but I think as a society, if we can't invest in the health service we need and want, then what's going to happen? You'll continue with an internal market, you'll continue with privatisation of parts of the NHS, you'll continue with profit centres located outside the UK, picking up our taxpayers' money that's paid into the NHS, which those profits are siphoned off and placed somewhere else. Sorry, those days are going to be over. We're going to have an NHS that's publicly run, publicly funded and publicly accountable in the future. That's what I'm determined to achieve. The question that Harry raised is actually a very good and very profound question about automation and the growth of high-tech ability to produce things, for example, driverless vehicles, road vehicles, as well as many other things. There is a new technological revolution taking place all over the world. You can either deal with that by allowing a small number of people to benefit very greatly from that technological revolution and bring about higher levels of unemployment and poverty in the rest of society, or you can have governments and an interventionist idea where you share the benefits of high technology. It's not an easy issue to deal with, it's very complicated, but if it's not addressed, then we'll just end up with greater disparity of wealth and power in our society than there is at the present time. And so I am asking the party to look at how we'll develop policies on this so that we share the benefits of technological change amongst everyone in society, rather than most technological change is often an opportunity for a small number of very powerful companies to make a great deal of money out of it, while the rest suffer as a response to it. So we don't have to be frightened of technology, but we have to be frightened of a political system that doesn't acknowledge that you have to share the wealth that's created by the brilliance of those scientists and engineers that bring about that new technology. That is what we're determined to do as a party. We'll be saying a lot more about that as policies develop. But again, we want ideas and opportunities coming from all of our members. If we face these things together, we're in a stronger position. If we let somebody else do it for us, we're all disempowered and weakened as a result of it. Thank you very much for a very good and very profound question.
question we have is from Michael Decker. Where is Michael Decker? Wave vigorously. He's left. Right. So Michael Decker asks, as the governor of one of the South East's largest mental health trusts, I'm concerned that we're suffering millions in cuts while at the same time government is saying more money is allocated. Can you call them out on this? After that, we've got Scarlett. Scarlett back.
I was wondering about lowering the voting age to 16 because I know just at my school alone there's lots of support from young people for the Labour Party in this campaign. I think just these few votes will make all the difference.
And last for this round, Reece. Where's Reece? Right behind you, Billy.
If you could give one piece of advice to our Prime Minister on how to better govern our country, obviously aside from the obvious of vacating number 10 for yourself, what would it be?
It's empty as that one, isn't it? Michael is not here, but asked a good question on mental health, and if we don't fund mental health services properly, then what happens is that many people suffer partly in silence, and sadly many end up in a deep crisis in their lives. And we as a party have a role to play in this, by ending the stigma associated with mental health, end the cheap remarks and the jokes about people that are going through a mental health crisis, and treat it as a serious issue that it absolutely is. And I think we're beginning to have a bit of an effect on that. But it's also about funding and genuine parity of esteem, which does not exist at the present time. Mental health services are never going to get the same degree of publicity as an A&E department. And I remember at the end of a local campaign I was involved in my constituency, where we fought very hard and very long to protect our local A&E department successfully, and it's still there and it's doing very well. At the rally, at the conclusion of it, the person who organised the campaign said, would you have all come out if it had been a mental health ward that was under attack? I think we all know the answer to that question. She was right to ask that question. It's up to us to recognise that health is for everybody. That means proper funding of mental health services, and also funding of school and children's mental health services. And I'm appalled that the government's response to the capitation funding crisis in our schools, which is serious and is appalling, is to take money out of the health budget in order to fund a mainstream school budget. Sorry, what we need is new money into education to fund both, not fund one at the expense of the other. And also to ensure that universities and colleges do have an effective mental health service for students going through incredible levels of stress. And I have appointed, therefore, Barbara Keeley to be a shadow cabinet member dealing with mental health and social care, so then that voice is there at the senior policy making level within the party. On the second question about voting age at 16, Scarlett, you're absolutely right. Yes, let's put the voting age at 16. It's party policy, it's in our manifesto, and I'm very pleased to say that Jim McMahon has drawn a good place in the private members' ballot. He put the question to his constituents in Oldham, what would they like? And he decided to put it to the Youth Parliament in Oldham, and I think we should all be grateful to the Youth Parliament in Oldham because they've written his bill for him, and it is to vote and lower the voting age to 16. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it will encourage a responsible attitude towards life and politics, and I think it's something that's well on time to do, and we'll do it as a Labour government. Okay? So, I was listening very carefully to your question on advice. It's a hard one, is this, but all I'd say is that if you're elected to any kind of public office, remember where you've come from. Remember who's put you there. and remember whose interests you are there to work for. Are you there for the powerful and very noisy vested interests that will put enormous amounts of pressure on you, or are you there for that whole coalition of people that came together to elect us into office to achieve social change and social justice in our society? So I would say this advice to anyone in public office: spend your time listening as well as talking, and remember where you've come from, because one day you're going to be back there.
I'm afraid the last question, we don't actually have a name attached to it, but we thought it might be in your general area of interest. It says, when you become Prime Minister, would you consider taking over Arsenal like the Qatari government have done with Paris Saint-Germain? That's it.
Right, well, the Arsenal question always comes up. You know what? Somebody even tried to get him on the act at Glastonbury and put up the Wenger must go ban. Well, I'm an Arsenal supporter, as everybody knows, and but I don't think it would be a terribly good idea for us to go into a general election campaign pledged to nationalise Arsenal. But I would say that I want to see greater democracy in the running of football in this country, because it seems to me that football fans, as with fans of any other sport or music, pay a great deal of money, and a number of people make a great deal out of that, but they enjoy it. And I think the German model of democracy in the running of its major football clubs, which results in lower ticket prices, high levels of participation and a much greater community feel about it, is something that is, to me, very good and very important. And so I'll continue supporting the club I choose, as I'm sure we all will. So we don't want to divide the audience anyway. Arsenal good yesterday. Bring about that democracy and participation. But whilst on the subject of sport, if I may say so, that sport is a very important part of a lot of people's lives. It's wonderful opportunities for young people, and it shouldn't just be that we watch it on television and enjoy it as spectators. I think participation in sport is a good thing to do. Therefore, funding of local authorities properly to help them not sell off playing fields, not close to